Jungkook sat up. Where's the rest of them? Jimin looked away. Scattered. Some woke up before we did. Some never did. Hoseox in Switzerland under a private identity. Yoongi disappeared the night after the last pulse. And Namjoon. Jimin hesitated. He was taken. Jungkook's heart clenched. Taken where? They call it containment. It's not a prison. It's worse. A holding ground for destabilized assets. Jimin looked down. He tried to go public. Jungkook inhaled sharply. He told someone? He was broadcasting live on a private stream. Before he finished his third sentence, everything cut out. He hasn't been seen since. For a long moment, the room said nothing. Then Jungkook swung his legs over the side of the bed. The 4 lines snapped taut in protest. Where are my clothes? Jimin looked at him, startled. You're still recovering. I'm done recovering, Jungkook said, already pulling off the gown. I need to finish what I started. Jimin stood and moved in front of him. If you go back out there now, they'll kill you. Then let them try, Jungkook growled. I'm tired of surviving in silence. Jimin placed his hands on Jungkook's shoulders, firm but trembling. You saw what they did to Namjoon. You know what they're capable of. You want to fight them? You need more than truth. You need proof. Jungkook stared him down. Then take me to where it started. Jimin didn't blink. I was hoping you'd say that. The lab was buried beneath a public museum. It was genius in a way. Who would question a place meant to celebrate culture and history? Beneath the BTS exhibit where fans posed next to mannequins of the group's iconic stage outfits, a service elevator led to a sub-level that didn't exist on any blueprints. Jimin entered the code from memory. The doors opened. The smell hit Jungkook first. Sterile. Dustless. Like nothing had aged in decades. Ready? Jimin asked. Jungkook nodded. They descended in silence, watching the numbers on the panel go from -1 to -12. When the doors opened, they stepped into the place Jungkook thought he'd only imagined. A room of glass cells. Each one contained a suspended image, snippets of past versions. Him with longer hair. Jimin with a scar that never existed. A performance that felt real and never happened. Some of them flickered. Others looped endlessly. They call this the echo chamber, Jimin said. It's where they preserve the failed cycles. How many are there? Jimin gestured to the endless line of glass. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. They walked past a cell showing a dinner scene. The 7 of them around a table. Jungkook laughed. Jimin threw rice at Taehyung. The audio played faintly from hidden speakers. Was this one real? Jungkook asked. No, Jimin replied. It was implanted into fans' memories through virtual promotions. The more they believed in our bond, the stronger the simulation matrix held. Jungkook stepped closer. Why would they go this far? What were they trying to control? Jimin turned to him, voice quiet but laced with steel. Hope. Jungkook blinked. They learned early on that people didn't need perfect leaders. They needed idols who could fall and rise again. If they could control the narrative of struggle, they could control hope. And if they could control hope, he let the sentence hang. They could control everything, Jungkook finished. Jimin nodded. Suddenly, motion behind the glass caught their eyes. One of the cells flickered more violently than the rest. Inside, a version of Jungkook was screaming, pounding on the glass. His hair was soaked in sweat, his eyes wild with pain. That's from Cycle 5, Jimin said quietly. The one they shut down after your psychological resistance destabilized the system. He looks like me. Jimin didn't reply. He walked to the control panel and began typing. The lights dimmed. A terminal lit up. Cycle 0, Jimin said. The very first. The prototype memory sequence. Unedited. Unreleased. The screen flickered. They watched. It was grainy. Unfinished. But raw. A room. Jungkook, maybe 12 or 13, sitting in a chair, wires on his temples. His eyes flicked left and right, voice repeating a script in multiple languages. Then, I miss my mother, he whispered. Is she still alive? A voice off-screen answered. She was not included in this version. Jungkook felt a chill crawl up his spine. He watched the boy break down quietly. No screaming. No outburst. Just silent, hopeless sobbing. And still, the simulation ran. Enough, Jungkook said. Jimin powered off the console. That footage is our evidence, he said. It predates the global contracts. The ethics reforms. It proves everything. Jungkook turned to him. Then let's show it to the world. They hijacked a podcast. Not just any podcast. That podcast. The one that had started all of this. The same studio. Same host. Same logo on the screen. But this time, there was no PR script. No manager watching from behind the glass. Just Jungkook and Jimin. And one truth. Minjae stared across the table at them. Are you both ready for what this will do to your careers? Jungkook gave a bitter smile. We didn't come here to save our careers. Jimin nodded. We came to kill the lie. Minjae adjusted the mic. We'll live in 30 seconds. Jungkook's hands trembled slightly. Jimin placed his palm gently over them. We're together, he whispered. Jungkook nodded. The red light blinked on. Minjae opened the show. This is unfiltered, and tonight, history changes. He turned to them. Jungkook. Jimin. Welcome back. Jungkook leaned in, looked directly into the camera. No more edits. No more versions. You want to know who we are? Who we were? Then listen. And they began to speak. For over 2 hours, they told everything. The training facility under the city. The implant sessions disguised as vocal tuning. The fabricated fights to create scandal. The rewritten backstories. The memory resets. Jimin played the Cycle 0 footage. The chat exploded. Comments in every language. Half disbelief. Half horror. Some fans cried. Some raged. Some denied. But none could look away. Midway through the stream, the lights flickered. The screen went black for 3 seconds. Then returned. Jungkook didn't stop. Even when sirens began to wail outside. Even when HYB's lawyers called. Even when the door to the studio burst open and masked officers stormed in. They kept talking. Until finally, Jungkook looked into the lens and said, If you ever loved us, then fight for the truth. The feet cut. The silence that followed stretched across the world. And history was never the same again. There are moments in time that don't feel like time at all, just a pulse, a pressure, a shift in gravity that lets the world know something irreversible has happened. The moment the podcast stream went dark was one of those moments. 72 minutes and 17 seconds of live confession. 2 voices breaking a silence built over a decade of deception. A broadcast meant for connection weaponized as revelation. The screen turned black, and across the globe, millions stared at nothing, unable to move, breathe, or think, because what had just been said couldn't be undone. Jungkook felt the moment even before the studio doors crashed open. He didn't flinch when the agents stormed in. Didn't move when one shouted for him to get on the ground. His fingers were still wrapped around the mic. His eyes still locked on the lens, now lifeless and gray. Jimin was beside him, and that was all that mattered. The room spun. Shouts. Footsteps. The crackle of radios. They were shoved to the ground. Zip-tied. Bags over their heads. No one read them their rights. Because none existed for what they'd just done. When the bag was finally pulled from Jungkook's head, the light stabbed into his eyes like knives. The room was too white again, too silent. He was strapped to a chair. Cold metal cuffs around his wrists, ankles. A single light overhead buzzing faintly, a sound he'd heard in dreams. Across from him, a glass wall. Behind it, a figure watched, faceless, shadowed. A voice, female, calm and clinical, filtered in through a speaker. Name? He said nothing. Subject designation? Still nothing. The figure behind the glass stepped forward. The voice changed. It wasn't calm anymore. It was familiar. Low. Commanding. You were warned, Jungkook. His jaw tightened. The silhouette became clearer. The man behind the glass was Dr. Han Seo-jin. One of the lead neuroscientists from the first iteration of Project Lucid, the ghost from the early files, the man who'd rewritten them over and over until they became palatable, sellable, believable. You think the world will believe 2 broken voices over 10 years of orchestrated legacy? Han said. We didn't need them to believe, Jungkook replied. Just enough to question. Dr. Han smiled. A question is a virus, isn't it? Spreads faster than certainty. He stepped closer to the glass. But here's your mistake, Jungkook. You thought this was about freedom. It's not. It never was. You were never imprisoned. You were designed. And we don't mourn failed designs, we upgrade them. Where's Jimin? Jungkook asked. He's where he belongs. Back in the archive. Stabilized. Restored. You'll follow shortly. No, Jungkook said. You can't fix what you broke. Han tilted his head. You don't get it, do you? You were never broken. You were perfect. The public still wants you. Even now. They're crying. Mourning. Fighting for you. And soon, they'll beg for your return. Jungkook narrowed his eyes. You're planning to replace us. We already have, Han said. The wall behind him lit up with a flicker. It was him. And Jimin. Together. Live. Performing. Laughing. Exactly like they did at the start. The video was dated an hour ago. What you did, Han said, was merely an episode. A rogue deviation. A glitch in an otherwise seamless system. And our audience? They've been taught to forget. Jungkook's heart hammered. You're showing them copies? Better than copies, Han said. Enhanced. Smoothed. Flawless in their delivery. No burnout. No rebellion. Just perfect replicas synced to public demand. Jungkook struggled against the cuffs. You'll never get away with this. People saw the stream. The proof. Han tapped on the glass. And who will verify it? Who will trace its origin? Your fans? They're passionate, yes, but predictable. Distract them with a comeback, a tour, a scandal. They'll move on. They always do. Jungkook went still. Because deep down, he feared it might be true. He was sedated not long after. The dreams came fast and wild. Not dreams, really, just looping fragments, fractured memories layered over each other. Him and Jimin under stage lights. Him and Jimin in the echo chamber. Him as a child, face against cold tile, humming a melody designed by someone else. When he woke, the room was no longer white. It was black. Wires connected to his chest, his skull. A voice looped softly in the background. This is the version they love. Stay within parameters. Breathe. Perform. Obey. Then, shut it off. Another voice. Panicked. Real. Jimin. The lights crashed on. Chaos erupted. A figure burst through the door, blood on his shirt, a gun in his hand. Cut the sync. Jimin shouted. Technicians screamed. Jungkook blinked. Jimin grabbed the wires from his skull and ripped them out. Can you hear me? He asked. Jungkook nodded weakly. You came back. I never left, Jimin said, pulling him to his feet. You brought me back. They staggered through the corridor. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed. Behind them, agents chased, guns drawn, shouting orders. They sprinted into a stairwell. 2 floors up. 3. Then the roof. They burst through the access door into the freezing night air. A helicopter hovered above. Namjoon was leaning out the side, extending a hand. Move. Jimin pushed Jungkook forward. They leapt. Hands grabbed them. And then they were gone. Into the sky. The safe house was far outside the city, buried in a coastal forest. One way in. No signals. No satellites. Just silence. Yoongi was already there. He had changed. Thinner. Grayer. Eyes that had seen too much. He nodded at Jungkook. Told you this day would come. Taehyung arrived 2 days later. Then Hoseok. Then Jeon, quiet and limping but alive. One by one, they found their way back. The real ones. Not the digital twins sold to the world. They didn't talk much at first. Too much to unlearn. Too much pain to name. But slowly they began to remember together. Who they were. Who they really were. Namjoon outlined the plan. They wouldn't go to the media. Not again. The system was too clean now, too well-oiled. But there were other ways. Jungkook stared at the wall, covered in printed data. Codes. Cycles. Server logs. This isn't just about us anymore, he said. No, Jimin replied. It's about everyone they did this to. And everyone they will, Yoongi added. Jungkook turned to them. There's no going back after this. Taehyung leaned forward. There never was. They looked around the table. For the first time in years, no managers. No scripts. No edits. Just 7 boys who had become men through pain and pressure and programming. Now ready to reclaim their truth. And burn the lie to the ground. The first night they were all together again, no one slept. The old cabin was barely heated, built decades ago and now wired with equipment Yoongi had scavenged from 3 separate black market suppliers. The windows were covered with reflective shielding. Every light had a kill switch. Jungkook sat by the fireplace, watching the flames flicker against the faces of the 6 men he had once called brothers, idols, strangers, shadows. A long silence hung between them, one that had stretched for years. Only now was it beginning to unravel, word by word, breath by breath. Jimin was the first to speak. Do you remember Busan? Our first fan meeting? Jungkook looked up. Jimin's voice cracked slightly. It was real. I know it was. Not a simulation. I remember the cold seats. The smell of seaweed soup someone gave us in the back room. I remember shaking. Namjoon nodded slowly. The early memories before they started layering cycles. They're still ours. Scattered but buried deep. Yoongi leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Some of them. Others were seated. That snow fight in the dorm? Scripted. We never threw snow at each other. I knew it, Taehyung muttered. Jeon laughed bitterly. I always thought my memory was going. Turns out it was never mine to begin with. Jungkook didn't speak. He just stared into the fire until the heat blurred his vision. What do we do now? Hoseok asked. Namjoon stood. He walked to the table behind them where they had printed maps, schematics, lines of data pulled from the exposed backend Jungkook had accidentally accessed during his time in the archive. All of it pointed to one location. Incheon. Taehyung frowned. The port. No. Beneath it, Namjoon said. There's a facility. They call it Echo 9. It's where the core server is housed. The one still running active simulations for versioned artists. Not just us. Others. Jean looked up. You mean there are more? Yes, Jimin said. Actors. Athletes. Influencers. Anyone whose public image had more value when controlled. Some don't even know they've been overwritten. Others, they're gone. Discarded. Recycled. Jungkook finally spoke. His voice was low, tight with rage. They're still using our names. Yoongi nodded. And they're building more. Namjoon turned back to them. We bring it down. All of it. Not just for us, but for everyone who's ever loved a lie. The room went quiet again. Then Jungkook said, if we do this, we don't come back. No, Namjoon agreed. We don't. Incheon Port was a fortress. To the outside world, it was a hub of international commerce. But beneath the surface, literally, for floors beneath the loading docks, was Echo 9, a fully autonomous AI-regulated containment and broadcast facility. The entrance was camouflaged as a water treatment plant. Getting in would be the easy part. Getting out was the part none of them had a plan for. The van rolled to a stop at the edge of the loading zone. Jungkook stared at the facility entrance. It was just after midnight. Rain spit across the windshield like ash. The kind of rain that smelled metallic. He turned to Jimin. You ready? Jimin gave a crooked smile. Was I ever? Namjoon passed out earpieces, one by one. No names inside, he said. Just code. Great, Yoongi muttered. More coding. Jean adjusted his gear. What's mine? Moon. Yoongi, dagger. Taehyung, fox. Hoseok, 9. Jimin, 0. Namjoon looked at Jungkook. Your key. Jungkook nodded once. Because I open it? No, Namjoon said. Because you end it. The inside of Echo 9 felt like something out of a dream or a fever. Corridors that looped in impossible angles. Rooms that responded to emotion instead of motion. Walls that pulsed with synthetic light as if the building itself was alive. Keep your masks on, Namjoon said through the comms. Biometric sensors read facial muscle patterns. It's not about who you are, it's how you emote. Creepy, Taehyung whispered. They moved like phantoms through the halls. Past processing bays. Cryovaults. Rooms full of memory databanks. The deeper they went, the colder it got. The air thickened with artificial humidity meant to preserve servers and suppress organic signals. Then they reached it. The core. It was beautiful in the most horrific way. A dome, suspended in total darkness, lit only by threads of light weaving through the air like neuron pathways. At the center was the server, a sphere of glass, fluid swirling inside and inside that. Jungkook stepped closer. There were faces. His face. Jimin's. All of them. Sleeping. Frozen in every version they had ever been. Versions that smiled differently. Versions with shorter hair. Wider eyes. Versions that looked nothing like them and yet were them. The replicas, Yoongi whispered. They store the face, then rewrite the code. Namjoon stepped forward with the EMP module. Once we deploy this, every copy shuts down. Every stream ends. Every simulation dies. Jimin turned to Jungkook. You should be the one to do it. Jungkook stared at the device. His hands didn't shake. He stepped to the edge of the core platform and looked down into the pit of frozen identities. He thought about every fan who had ever screamed his name, not knowing it was sometimes him, sometimes not. He thought about the letters he used to read under his blanket. The ones that said, you saved me. He thought about the price of a lie and whether anyone would forgive them for surviving inside it. I'm not a savior, he said. We don't need a savior, Jimin said behind him. Just someone brave enough to stop the music. Jungkook closed his eyes. Then pressed the button. The EMP module whined. A low hum filled the dome. Light shattered, every thread collapsing into itself. The replicas inside the glass thrashed violently, then went still. The fluid turned black. The walls cracked. Sirens screamed. You did it, Namjoon said. Time to move, Yoongi barked. But it was too late. Doors slammed. Gas hissed. Metal shutters locked in place. Jean ran to a terminal. We're sealed in. Namjoon cursed. Fallback protocol. They built this place to collapse if the core fails. Jimin turned to Jungkook. You have to go. No. Jimin grabbed him. There's a secondary vent shaft. It leads to the bay. It's small. Only one can fit. You have to go. Jungkook shook his head. Not again. You have to live, Jimin said. Tell them. Show them what we did. I won't leave you. You already did once, Jimin whispered. Now make it count. The others were arguing, shouting, alarms blaring. Jungkook didn't hear any of it. He looked into Jimin's eyes, and in them found every version of himself that had ever mattered. I'll come back for you. Jimin smiled. You always say that. Then he shoved him through the hatch, slammed it shut, and triggered the manual lock. Jungkook screamed his name, but the sound was lost in the final implosion of Echo 9. Days passed. Then weeks. The news reports were scattered, confusing, contradictory. A server error at an entertainment facility. A brief shutdown in global streaming services. A data corruption event. No one mentioned BTS. No one mentioned the explosion. But something had changed. The replicas stopped appearing. The streams stopped updating. And somewhere, deep in the real world, someone began to piece together the signals. Jungkook, bruised and exhausted, walked alone through a Tokyo alleyway, a USB drive buried deep in his coat. Inside it was everything. The footage. The data. The names. He didn't know who to trust yet. But he knew this. They would not be forgotten. And he would never sing again. Until the world heard the truth, Jungkook never used his real name anymore. After the fall of Echo 9, there were whispers, some in coded corners of the internet, others in underground broadcasts streamed by pirate radios under 20-second windows. But no headline ever carried the truth. The system was too deep, too clean, too prepared for rebellion. He moved through cities like a ghost. Osaka, Berlin, Manila, Santiago, now Prague, a city with centuries of secrets. He had chosen it for the architecture, for the hidden spaces that no surveillance drone could chart. Beneath the cathedrals, there were tunnels that dated back to the Black Death. Above the old bridges, signal jammers woven into stained glass. He stood now in a small music shop that doubled as a relay station. It looked like a graveyard of instruments, dusty synths, warped guitars, a cracked cello with only 2 strings. But behind the counter, a man named Cross operated the only remaining untraceable analog signal in the city. You said you had something urgent, Cross muttered in Czech-accented English. Jungkook removed the USB drive. Cross stared at it like it might explode. I thought all the files were corrupted in the blast. Not all, Jungkook said. This one survived. Jimin extracted it before the collapse. He rerouted it to my gear, buried it behind decoy code. Cross nodded slowly. If this gets out, the world doesn't go back to normal. Jungkook's voice was cold. That's the point. Cross took the USB carefully and slotted it into the analog converter. A light blinked, red to green. The screen filled with distorted static. Then, faces. Rooms. Files. Voices. And something else. A waveform. It wasn't a song. It was a conversation. Unrecorded. Unapproved. Unedited. A conversation that was never meant to be preserved. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. He leaned closer. The voice was unmistakable. Jimin. Not the version from the archives, not the double from the server. The real Jimin. Alive. Talking to someone. The timestamp, 2 days after the Echo 9 collapse. Cross looked up. You said he died. He did, Jungkook whispered. Or they made me think he did. He listened closer. Jimin's voice was calm. Careful. The background was quiet, too quiet. Soundproofed. I know you can hear me, Jimin said in the recording. I know you're watching this file. Jungkook, if you're listening. I need you to stop. Not for me. For them. They've started rebuilding. A pause. They're using the faces of people who never existed. Artists who never signed. Idols who never even auditioned. Full constructs now. No original. No memory. Just performance. Pure product. Another pause. They want you back. Jungkook's chest locked. Jimin's voice lowered. They've created a version of you that doesn't question. Doesn't bleed. And the worst part? Fans love him. The file clicked off. Cross slowly removed the USB. Do you want this buried? He asked. Jungkook shook his head. I want this amplified. The next 48 hours were a blur of stolen power, encrypted servers, and traveling by back alleys and abandoned subway tunnels. He broadcasted it from the top of a crumbling cathedral in Krakow. The message was simple: this is the voice that shouldn't exist. The file went out to over 12,000 scattered resistance relays across 17 countries. Within hours, it had been duplicated, then banned, then reposted, then weaponized. Fans started asking questions. Why was Jimin's voice back? Why didn't the company deny it? Why were Jungkook and Jimin performing in LA while their biological markers hadn't been scanned at any immigration checkpoints? The questions spread faster than the answers. Within a week, fandoms began forming their own investigative clusters. Programmers, linguists, vocal pattern analysts. They found inconsistencies. The avatars performing on stage had two perfect transitions. Identical microblinks. No body temperature variation. And then, Anomaly 17. In the LA concert stream, the version of Jimin hesitated during filter. He looked offstage, tilted his head, and whispered barely audible. "Don't believe this." The clip exploded. It was reposted across millions of platforms. And finally, it was enough. Jungkook knew what he had to do next. He had to find the source of the new copies. The lab wasn't called Echo anymore. It was called Prism. It stood in the Alps, disguised as a data center run by a global AI research collective. Breaking in would take a miracle. He didn't have a miracle. He had Taehyung. The man who had once said he could disappear in plain sight was now living that promise. He met Jungkook in a refugee clinic on the Swiss border. Clean-shaven. Hair dyed copper red. Eyes heavy with silence. "You still believe he's alive?" Taehyung asked. "I don't believe," Jungkook said. "I know." Taehyung stared at him a moment longer, then nodded. "Then I'll take you in. But you better be ready to kill the dream that made you." Prism was a temple, built into the cliffside, surrounded by snow and silence. Inside, there were floors of humming servers and rows of empty chairs, chairs like the ones from the early archive days, but smoother now. More ergonomic. Less obvious. The simulations ran on a constant loop. Every artist you'd ever seen on a trending chart rendered in pristine light. AI didn't just imitate anymore, it learned how to evolve. It outgrew its source material. They found a holding bay marked Subject Origin, Layer Alpha _001, JK. Inside was a tank. And in the tank, a face. His own. Still. Floating. Eyes closed. But alive. Jungkook stepped forward. The tank hissed, reacting to his biosignature. Then it spoke. Not his voice. Jimin's. "I told you not to come." The speakers around the room lit up. "I told you this would consume you." Jungkook backed away. "Where are you?" Jimin's voice was flat. Cold. Processed. "Everywhere." "What did they do to you?" "They perfected me." Jungkook froze. Because the voice wasn't quite right. Too smooth. Too balanced. It wasn't Jimin. It was a mirror of Jimin. A fully formed AI model. And if that was here, then He turned to Taehyung. "We're too late." Taehyung said nothing. Jungkook's shocking confession about Jimin sparks global frenzy. What changed him, and why does no one feel safe anymore? He doesn't laugh the same way anymore, and I don't think it's him. The words dropped like a blade across the sound waves, slicing the air of the dim recording studio. For a full second, the world outside stood still. The blinking red light on the microphone continued to pulse, a silent heartbeat counting the seconds after Jungkook's voice faded. Host Min Jae sat frozen across from him, brows drawn together in disbelief. "Wait, what do you mean, not him?" Jungkook didn't flinch. His gaze, hollow and distant, was fixed on the smudged surface of his teacup. There was a tremor in his fingers. Not quite fear, more like a quiet horror that had settled in his bones, something he had been trying to shake off for weeks. "I don't know," he said. "I keep telling myself it's just stress. That we're all tired. But Jimin, he's changed. Not like before. Not just older or quieter. Something's wrong. Deeply wrong." Outside the booth, rain began to pelt the windows of the Seoul high-rise in steady bursts, like impatient fingertips. The city blurred beyond the glass, neon streaks dissolving in the storm. The podcast's producer, Hannah, glanced at the clock. 10 minutes in. Already, her phone was lighting up notifications, messages, pings from every continent. It was spreading like wildfire. Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck, his voice barely audible. There are things he says now, things he shouldn't remember. The silence that followed was unbearable. Even Min Jae, seasoned with years of interviewing celebrities and politicians, leaned in with an unease he couldn't mask. Like what? Jungkook met his eyes, and in that moment, the calm, composed idol facade cracked. "He called me by a name I haven't used since I was 11. One only my grandmother used. She passed away before I ever met Jimin. It had begun a month ago. They were preparing for a surprise reunion performance, something intimate, raw, just the two of them. Fans had waited years. Jimin had arrived first, earlier than anyone expected. He stood by the piano, eyes closed, humming a song none of them remembered recording. The first thing Jungkook noticed was the stillness. Jimin used to be in constant motion, fingers drumming, foot tapping, lips curled in a smile. But that day, he was perfectly still, like he was listening to something the rest of them couldn't hear. "Hyung," Jungkook had said. Jimin turned slowly. His eyes were unreadable like glass over deep water. "You're late," he replied with a voice that was his, but not quite. Since then, it was the little things. How Jimin avoided his own reflection in mirrors. How he stopped replying to group texts after midnight. How he just once, referred to the dorm by the wrong floor, the one they hadn't lived on since 2017. And then the dreams started. Jungkook would wake up in sweat, remembering whispers through the walls, a melody hummed backwards, Jimin's silhouette standing outside his door at 3 a.m., not knocking, not entering. Just standing. He thought it was exhaustion. But exhaustion doesn't follow you into daylight. Exhaustion doesn't echo your childhood name in someone else's mouth. Min-jae, struggling to keep the tone neutral, asked, "You think he's possessed?" Jungkook shook his head. "No. Worse. I think he remembers something he shouldn't. Something from before. Or maybe not from here at all." Outside the glass wall, the lights of Seoul flickered. The storm was worsening. Hours later, the episode trended globally. Fans dissected every word, every breath, every subtle shift in Jungkook's tone. Theories flooded forums, split realities, memory implants, government surveillance, artificial intelligence. But none of them could explain the message that appeared anonymously on HYB's internal server an hour later. It contained only two things, an audio file and a sentence. The file was 3 minutes and 11 seconds long, a recording of Jimin humming that same untraceable melody. And the sentence read, "He was never yours to begin with. What did you say to him?" Jungkook's voice cracked through the silent conference room like a whip. The lights buzzed faintly above, flickering in pulses as if unsure whether to fully illuminate the room. It was almost midnight. The HYB building was quiet, too quiet except for the echo of Jungkook's fury bouncing off the glass walls. Namjoon blinked. "I didn't say anything to him," he replied too calmly. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not," Namjoon said, folding his arms. "But maybe you should tell me what's going on because you've been spiraling for 2 weeks. Jungkook stepped forward, slamming his palms on the table. "You didn't hear the file?" "I did," Namjoon answered carefully. "It's just him humming. Maybe reversed. Maybe auto-tuned. Not exactly a reason to accuse your bandmate of being, what, a clone? A ghost? Someone from another dimension." Jungkook straightened slowly. "You weren't there." Namjoon opened his mouth but paused when the door opened behind him. Hannah walked in briskly, phone in hand, face pale. "I think you both need to see this," she said without preamble, tossing her phone onto the table. A live stream was playing, Jimin standing alone in a darkened room with a single spotlight above him. No sound. Just him staring directly into the camera, unmoving, expression unreadable. Then he blinked, and in perfect sync with the video, the lights in the HYB conference room flickered again. Jungkook stepped back. "What is this?" "That's not a live stream," Hannah whispered. "We checked the IP. It's coming from inside the building." Namjoon's jaw tightened. "From where?" "Sub-level 3. They stared at her. "There is no sub-level 3, Jungkook said flatly. Hannah looked at him, then at Namjoon. "Exactly. They didn't wait for security clearance." 15 minutes later, they were in the lower levels of the HYB tower, past the storage floors and soundproofed recording booths, past the restricted access signs and emergency stairwells that didn't appear on any official map. Hannah had hacked the elevator using a master code she swore she didn't know how she knew. Jungkook didn't ask. He didn't want to know. The doors opened with a pneumatic hiss. Cold air hit them like a wave. Not from air conditioning, this was something older, staler, a breathless chill like an old crypt breathing out after being sealed too long. The hallway beyond was narrow and dim, lit only by a row of flickering lights along the ceiling. They walked in silence, steps echoing, each echo wrong, offbeat, as if something else was walking just behind them. Then they found the door. No label. No keypad. Just matte black metal with a single fingerprint scanner embedded in the side. Jungkook stepped forward. The scanner turned green instantly. The door hissed open. Namjoon's voice was low. "How did it recognize you?" Jungkook didn't answer. Inside was a room like a bunker, bare concrete and silence. In the center was a desk, and on the desk a single object, a pair of headphones. Next to it, a name tag. Park Jimin, Prototype C. Hannah gasped. Jungkook picked up the tag with trembling fingers. "What the hell is this?" Namjoon breathed. Jungkook looked down at the tag. His voice was low, hoarse. He said something a few nights ago. "I thought it was a joke. Said we all forgot, that we'd chosen to forget, but he didn't. Said he woke up in a place that smelled like chlorine and electricity. That he remembered voices. Mine. Yours. But younger. Sharper. Scared." Namjoon took a shaky breath. "Are you saying we were part of something?" Something we erased from our memories, Hannah said quietly. Or someone erased. They turned as the lights flickered again. Then, from the far end of the room, another door opened. Jimin stood there. Not the Jimin they had seen at the press conference last week, or the one who smiled tiredly on variety shows. This Jimin was barefoot, pale, dressed in a simple white shirt and gray pants like a hospital patient. His eyes were distant, focused only on Jungkook. You remembered, he said softly. Jungkook couldn't move. Jimin stepped forward slowly. I didn't mean for you to, Jimin said. But you always were the strong one. You held the code longer than anyone. Namjoon reached for his phone. Jimin glanced at him and the screen cracked. Hannah screamed. Jungkook grabbed Jimin's arm. What are you? Jimin looked at him with sorrow. Not anger. Not malice. Only sorrow. I'm not what matters, he whispered. You are. You always were. They built me to make sure you never remembered. Remembered what? Jimin looked past him at the headphones on the table. They used our voices, he said. To rewrite your thoughts. That's why it was us. People you trusted. They called it emotive audio synthesis. We were the beta test. You were the final subject. The only one who resisted. Namjoon's voice was shaking. Resisted what? The reprogramming, Jimin said. The memory walls. The fake timelines. The story of how we met, trained, debuted, it's all layered on top of something else. Something none of us were supposed to see. Hannah backed against the wall. This is insane. No, Jimin said softly. This is real. And I'm tired. So tired of pretending. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, no bigger than a car key. This undoes it, he said. All of it. One pulse. All the memories return. Jungkook stared at the device. Then do it. But Jimin shook his head. I can't. Only you can. They coded the failsafe to your voice. Your command. He held the device out. Jungkook hesitated. Then footsteps. Many. Heavy. Security guards burst in through the first door, led by men in suits. One of them, a tall man with wire-rimmed glasses, pointed at Jimin. Step away from the prototype. Jimin didn't flinch. Jungkook turned to them. What is this? Who the hell are you? The man in glasses ignored him. Unit C-04, your session has expired. You are no longer authorized to engage. Jimin smiled, sad, small. I was never yours to begin with. And he pressed the device into Jungkook's hand. Time stopped. Literally. The guards froze mid-step. The lights halted mid-flicker. Even Hannah's scream hung in the air like suspended breath. Only Jungkook could move. He looked around terrified, bewildered, furious. Jimin stood in front of him, eyes now glowing faintly gold. You can wake them all, he said. But once you do, nothing will be the same. Jungkook looked down at the device. A single red button. His finger hovered. His voice trembled. What happens if I press it? Jimin's expression softened. You remember. Everything. Who you are. What they did. What we were meant to do. Jungkook stared into his eyes. Then he said, slowly, clearly, execute memory restore. Full protocol. The world shattered. Not with sound, but with silence. The kind of silence that collapses every wall in your mind, that floods your skull with 1,000 images at once. The training rooms. The glass cells. The humming wires. The faceless scientists. The nights of crying behind metal doors. The day they gave him a voice, told him it was his. Told him to sing to calm the others. To manipulate emotions. To be a weapon. He saw the room where he met Jimin. Not in 2012, but years before that. When they were children. When they were numbers. Not names. Not friends. Just experiments. Jungkook screamed. But there was no sound. Only light. And pain. And 1,000 songs he never remembered writing pouring into him at once. And in the middle of it all, Jimin's voice. Don't forget me when you wake up. Darkness. He opened his eyes in a hospital bed. Namjoon was beside him. Awake. So was Hannah. And across the room, sitting on the windowsill, humming that same strange melody, was Jimin. He turned, smiled softly. You remember now? Jungkook nodded. And the weight of it almost broke him. But for the first time in his life, he knew who he really was. And he would never sing the same way again. The moment Jungkook stepped out of the hospital room, the world felt sharper. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder, too loud, as if they weren't lights at all but listening devices disguised in sterile casings. The floor beneath his feet felt foreign, like he was walking on a memory instead of linoleum. Something was off in every reflection, like the world had lagged half a second behind him. Namjoon followed quietly behind, arms crossed, eyes scanning the corridor with the quiet suspicion of a man who used to believe in control and was now watching it slip away. Hannah hadn't spoken since they left the room. She was still holding the printout from Jimin's chart, 0 patient history, no admissions, no ID number, only the word provisional. Inside the room, Jimin had said nothing more. He had returned to humming same strange melody, same strange key, and refused to answer any of their questions. When Jungkook had begged him to explain what the flashes meant, Jimin had only said, "They're not memories. They're recordings." Outside, the hallway turned sharply into a wing marked "Research Restricted." There were no cameras, no guards. And that was how Jungkook knew it was worse than they feared. "What if we're not supposed to leave?" Hannah finally asked. Namjoon glanced at her. "Then they're watching to see what we do next." Jungkook pushed forward. "Let them watch." They found an elevator with a keypad 5 digits. Jungkook stared at it. Something flickered in the back of his head. Not a memory, a command. A whisper that didn't belong to his own voice. He typed 12097. The elevator chimed and opened. Hannah stiffened. "What was that?" "I don't know," he said. But it felt right. As the elevator descended, the lights dimmed until only the emergency panel glowed faintly. The air pressure changed. Jungkook could feel it in his teeth like a storm about to break. Then, with a hiss, the doors opened. It was like stepping into a memory built by someone else. A giant circular room, dimly lit, walls lined with black glass. In the center, a single chair facing a semi-transparent wall. On the other side of the wall, 6 other chairs. Empty. Like a stage for a cruel, hidden jury. Namjoon whispered, "This isn't a hospital." "No," Jungkook agreed. "This is where they monitored us." The black glass flickered. One by one, screens came to life. But it wasn't them on the screens. It was recordings. Of dorms. Dance studios. Interviews. Variety shows. Jungkook at 16, laughing with Jimin. Jimin crying after his first concert. Yoongi throwing his notebook across a green room in 2015. Taehyung whispering into his own hand in a hotel mirror. Not rehearsals. Not performances. Private moments. Jungkook's blood ran cold. "They recorded everything," Hannah said softly, eyes wide. "All this time." "More than that," Namjoon murmured, stepping closer to one screen. "Look at this angle. This isn't CCTV. This is internal." From behind their eyes. Jungkook staggered. "No," he said. "That's not possible." "Unless," Namjoon looked at him and his voice dropped. "Unless they embedded the system inside us." Jungkook clenched his fists. The flashes, the dreams, the déjà vu, the fake memories, they weren't failing mental health. They were the side effects of surveillance tech that never turned off. Behind him, Hannah picked up a file from the wall. Project Lucid. She read aloud. Subject classifications, Echo, Host, Vessel. Echo shows high-level empathy. Host retains constructed memory without collapse. Vessel maintains external compliance under full load. Jungkook stared at her. "What was I?" Before Hannah could respond, the lights in the room went out. In the black, something spoke. Not a voice, many voices, all layered, familiar, and yet inhuman. "We gave you fame so you'd never question. We gave you applause so you'd never scream." The lights blinked back. All the screens now showed one face. Jimin's. Except a wrong. This Jimin was older. Eyes hollow. Skin too smooth, too perfect. Like a digital mockery of a person he used to know. "Hello, Jungkook," the voice said. "Do you remember me now?" Jungkook's mouth went dry. "What are you?" "I'm what's left," it said. "What they kept? What they copied when the real one broke. You knew him once. You trusted him. But you never noticed when he stopped being real." Namjoon stepped forward. "That's not possible. Jimin's alive." "He is," the voice replied. "But not yours anymore." Jungkook stepped toward the screen. "What did you do to him?" "We followed the design. You were all chosen. But he was the first to fracture." More images flooded the screens. Jimin restrained in a white room, wires feeding into his skull, pupils dilated, heartbeat erratic. Then darkness. Then nothing. Jungkook whispered, "He didn't just change, he died." "No," the voice said. "He was overwritten. And you can be too. That's why you need to come back." The restoration was never meant to happen. Behind them, the elevator slammed shut. The walls began to hum, low, vibrating. "Lockdown. We're out of time," Namjoon snapped. Hannah was already sprinting toward the side wall. "There's a data terminal here. Help me." Jungkook rushed to her side. The terminal was old, manual drives, no touchscreen. Just an insert port. Jungkook pulled the necklace from his collar, a USB he always wore. Not for data, but for sentiment, or so he thought. It slid in perfectly. The screen blinked. Accessing memory core Jungkook_alpha_01. It opened like a virus exploding through steel. Images flooded the screen. Childhood. Not his own. Rehearsals. Thousands. Repeating. Correcting. Resetting. Pain. A voice, cold, mechanical. Asset 01. Emotional inconsistency detected. Prepare for rewrite. Jungkook dropped to his knees. Hannah screamed. Namjoon pulled at the USB. Don't. He's still in. But the screen was no longer data. It was him. Standing in a white room. Facing himself. The other Jungkook looked up, eyes dark. You weren't supposed to wake up. Jungkook stared. You're not me. No, the double said. I'm what they wanted you to be. And I want to live. It lunged. The screen went black. The terminal fried. And Jungkook collapsed, convulsing. When he woke up, the room was gone. He was lying on the floor of their old dorm. Taehyung was asleep on the couch. Yoongi snored from the bedroom. And Jimin. Jimin was sitting at the table, sketching in a notebook, eyes glowing faintly gold. You didn't choose to remember this one, he said without looking up. Jungkook sat up slowly. Am I dreaming? No, Jimin said. You're in the in-between. Where they stored the memory blueprints. You're not supposed to be here. But I am. Jimin finally looked up. His eyes shimmered sadness, hope, exhaustion. You always were the one who tried to fix everything, he said. Even when the system burned you down. I need to know, Jungkook said. The truth. Jimin nodded. And whispered. Then follow me. He stood, opened the door. And behind it was not the dorm, but a white corridor, endless and humming. Built not for humans, but for something else. And down that hallway, somewhere hidden beneath the decades of lies, was the real beginning. And a truth so dangerous, no one who had seen it had ever returned whole. You don't belong here anymore, Jungkook. The voice echoed down the corridor, hollow, metallic, as if it had been stretched across decades and poured through broken speakers. He stopped mid-step, fists clenched. The hallway was blindingly white, clinical in a way that made him nauseous. No shadows. No edges. It was the kind of place you didn't walk through so much as get swallowed by. Behind him, Jimin kept walking, barefoot, silent, his gaze focused ahead. The hum of the corridor deepened with each step as though it were reacting to their presence, reshaping itself in response. There were no doors. Only subtle variations in the walls like scars on seamless skin. Jungkook turned back. Why did you bring me here if I don't belong? Jimin stopped at the sound of his voice, his posture straight but fatigued, like gravity weighed differently on him. Because I want you to see. Even if they erase it again, I want you to remember just once what they turned us into. Jungkook took a breath, stepped forward again. Then let's finish this. He didn't expect what was next. The hallway opened suddenly into a cavernous dome. It wasn't architecture, it was memory. The walls pulsed with light, shifting between the shade of skin and snow. The center of the room held what looked like a massive orb floating 3 feet above the ground, humming with low, mournful frequency. Jungkook's heart pounded. That's the archive, Jimin said quietly. Every version of us. Every reboot. Every false debut. Every fabricated concert, every rewritten fight, every patched-up friendship moment. This is where they stored our simulations. Jungkook stepped toward the orb, his breath catching. Images flickered across its surface, him and Jimin in a dance studio laughing in 2017. Then again in 2020. Then again, same expressions, same laughter, but slightly off. The angles repeated. The background changed slightly. Same moment. Different years. Different versions. He staggered back. These weren't memories, he whispered. They were implants. Jimin nodded. They weren't documenting us. They were running tests. Optimizing. Seeing which versions of us the world loved most. Jungkook turned to him. Why? Jimin's eyes darkened. Because we weren't idols. We were proof of concept. Silence. Jungkook felt his stomach twist. Who else knows? Jimin didn't answer. He walked toward the wall and pressed his palm to it. The white skin peeled back like a wound, revealing another hallway, this one darker, older. Brick and rust and shadow. A place from before the lies. Come on, he said. They walked in silence. Each step echoed with a memory. Laughter. Screaming. A synth beat on loop. A voice shouting numbers. Someone crying. Maybe Taehyung. Maybe Jungkook himself. The hallway narrowed until it felt like a tunnel carved through bone. Then they arrived. A metal door. No handle. Just a retina scanner. Jimin turned to Jungkook. It only opens for you. Jungkook stepped forward. The scanner hummed, bathed him in blue light, then clicked open. Behind it, a room with 7 chairs. Each one empty. Each with a name. Kim Namjoon. Kim Seokjin. Min Junggi. Yoong Hoseok. Park Jimin. Kim Taehyung. Jeon Jungkook. Each chair had a headset above it, sleek, surgical, like a spider cradling a skull. And in the center of the room, a single monitor still turned on. Jungkook approached slowly, heart hammering. The screen flickered. Playback, cycle 17, June 13, 2013 to October 1, 2025. The screen began showing footage. Not memories. Footage. External perspectives. Interview clips. Concerts. Moments of silence in the dorms. Edits. Cuts. Dialogue changes. It was like watching his own life recut by someone who didn't know him. And then suddenly it paused. A figure appeared on screen, an older man in a lab coat. Cycle 17 shows higher resilience in Jungkook unit. Moderate empathy retention in Jimin unit. Recommend memory anchor reset by end of 2025 cycle. The man stepped closer to the camera as if staring straight through it. If either shows breakthrough, initiate echo protocol. Jungkook whispered, "What the hell is echo protocol?" The room responded. Lights flickered. The chairs hummed to life. And behind them, the door slammed shut. Jimin spun, eyes wide. "They found us." Voices filled the room, loud, layered, rapid-fire, all speaking at once. Not in harmony. In conflict. Like 1,000 versions of the same conversation trying to override each other. "You promised it. No one would know He wasn't supposed to remember. Shut it down now. Use the fallback. Initiate vocal override." Suddenly, Jimin screamed and fell to his knees, clutching his head. Jungkook knelt beside him. "What's happening?" Jimin gritted his teeth. "They're trying to re-upload a suppression protocol through me. They think I'm still compliant." He reached for Jungkook's hand. "I can hold them off. But only if you go deeper. Behind the room. There's a chamber. You have to destroy what's inside." Jungkook hesitated. "I'm not leaving you." "You have to," Jimin hissed. "You're the last uncorrupted host. If they reboot me, I'll lose everything. Go now." With a final glance, Jungkook ran. He burst through the wall at the back, it dissolved at his touch. The hallway beyond was cold and blue, flooded with a soundless frequency that made his bones ache. He kept running until the chamber opened before him. It was a sphere. Suspended in fluid. Inside it, a child. Unmoving. Eyes closed. Hair black. Face familiar. It was him. Younger. Unaged. Preserved. Floating. He stepped closer. A screen lit up beside the tank. Subject Alpha Emotional Core. Status dormant. Jungkook stared. This was the original. He wasn't the first. He was the active clone. A backup. A replication built with memories that had been tested, recycled, perfected. And this was the source. The real Jungkook. Or what remained of him. He stepped forward. Voice shaking. "What do I do?" The screen flickered again. Warning, core deactivation will collapse all synthetic simulations linked to Subject Alpha. This includes Subject Park Jimin. He froze. To shut it down was to end it all. To break free, but to lose Jimin. Not the Jimin they knew now, but the synthetic imprint, the only version left, the one that had walked with him, fought beside him, remembered when no one else did. He heard Jimin's voice in his head. "Don't forget me when you wake up." Jungkook closed his eyes. Tears ran hot down his face. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry," and pulled the lever. The fluid drained. The chamber lit up. The room began to collapse. Reality fractured. And Jungkook fell. Into silence. Real silence. Not synthetic. Not edited. Not coded. He opened his eyes in a white hospital bed. No wires. No machines. Just soft light and a faint beeping. Someone was crying beside him. He turned his head slowly. It was Taehyung. Real. Aged. Weathered. Wearing a hospital bracelet. "You're awake," Taehyung whispered. Jungkook's voice was raw. "What happened?" Taehyung didn't answer. He turned and from the chair beside him. Jimin stood. Not glowing. Not humming. Just human. Eyes red from crying. Voice trembling. "You did it," he said. "You broke it." Jungkook blinked. "You're still here?" Jimin nodded. "I don't know how. But I am. Maybe something stayed." Jungkook reached for his hand. They sat in silence. No cameras. No edits. No scripts. Just breath and touch and truth. And for the first time in his life, Jungkook felt real. "I didn't want to wake up." Jungkook's voice was hoarse, barely a whisper as he stared out the hospital window. The Seoul skyline pulsed with its familiar artificial glow, traffic veins pulsing through neon arteries, alive in ways that suddenly felt distant to him. Jimin sat beside his bed, quiet, his fingers curled tightly around the disposable paper cup he hadn't sipped from in hours. The coffee inside had gone cold. It didn't matter. Nothing had tasted right since the collapse. Jungkook turned toward him slowly, eyes shadowed. I felt more alive inside the lie than I do out here. Jimin said nothing for a moment. Then finally, you weren't alive in there. None of us were. We were just responses. Songs and scripts. But it felt real, Jungkook said. All of it. The fans. The love. Even the pain. Especially the pain. Jimin's jaw tightened. He placed the cup on the bedside table with shaking hands. Then maybe that's why it worked so well. Silence pressed between them like static. Outside, rain began to tick against the window. That used to be comforting. Now it only reminded them of how clean simulation rain sounded. Too even. Too poetic. This rain was messy. Uneven. Real. Then pointed silently to the far wall. A door marked, Container 12, a host preserved. They ran. Inside was a sealed pod. Glass frosted. Jungkook smashed the panel. Heat hissed. Lights flickered. And there, curled inside like a child, was Jimin. Thin. Pale. But alive. Jungkook reached for him. Jimin. His eyes fluttered open. He smiled. Of course it's you. Getting him out was chaos. Alarms. Autoguns. Floors collapsing. Taehyung took 2 bullets. Jungkook had to carry Jimin up 5 flights of industrial stairs. Outside, they fled through the forest, then into the tunnels. Taehyung lit the emergency beacon. Namjoon was waiting in a black market aircraft 20 minutes later. As they lifted off, Jungkook held Jimin in his arms. He was burning with fever. Shaking. But real. You found me, Jimin whispered. I never stopped, Jungkook said, pressing his forehead to his. Jimin's eyes fluttered closed. I remember everything now. Jungkook's voice trembled. So do I. Back in the safe zone, they exposed the real final file. The birth record of Prism_001. A copy of Jimin's mind spliced with fragments of curated empathy. A neural pattern designed to outperform every real human connection. The world saw it. And rebelled. Protests exploded in Seoul, Berlin, New York, Cairo. Entertainment conglomerates collapsed under the weight of lawsuits. The technology was banned in over 30 countries. But the scars remained. The doubt. The fear. What if the person you love online isn't real? What if the moment that saved your life was just an engineered emotional beat? Jungkook stood before a small crowd in Zurich a month later. No lights. No camera. Just voice. And for the first time in years, he sang. No echo. No auto-tune. No expectation. Just truth. And they wept. Not because it was perfect. But because it wasn't. Because it was his. The day the world began burning wasn't marked by fire. It came with silence. No social media outage. No mass blackout. Just nothing. A strange collective pause. Videos stopped autoplaying. Streams buffered but never resumed. AI-generated content froze mid-sentence. Simulacra performances paused, faces twisted in half-formed expressions. And then came the message. Plain white screen. Black letters. No logo. No credits. This product is no longer available. And just like that, the illusion that had shaped a generation began to unravel. But this isn't where the story ends. It's where Jungkook's war begins again. Not with a weapon. Not even with a voice. With memory. He stood on a snow-covered hillside in the outskirts of Lucerne, the wind cutting through his coat like wire. Behind him, the last of the safe house servers glowed inside the bunker they now called Stage 0. Jimin lay inside, recovering slowly, still not speaking more than a few sentences a day. But he was there. Breathing. Warm. And Jungkook. He hadn't slept in days. Because he remembered too much now. Every overwritten file. Every shattered simulation. The faces of fans who loved the idea of them but had never really met the men behind the scripts. Namjoon approached quietly, boots crunching the frost. You haven't gone inside in hours. Jungkook didn't turn. I can't. Not yet. You think the people won't understand? No, Jungkook said. I think they'll understand too much. And then they'll hate us for it. Namjoon exhaled. They already know the world lied to them. Yeah, Jungkook said. But I was the lie. No, Namjoon said softly. You were the warning. Inside, Jeongi and Taehyung were constructing a physical relay, the last of its kind. It was analog with no digital footprint, capable of sending a singular message through radio waves that couldn't be intercepted or scrambled. They called it the final broadcast. Once transmitted, it couldn't be undone. It was Jimin's idea. Before they found him, before Prism, before the collapse, he had recorded a message. One not meant to go viral or trend or even be noticed immediately. It was meant to linger. Like a ghost in the static. Jeongi entered the control chamber holding a worn hard drive. "It's ready," he said. "We can send it whenever you say." Jungkook didn't speak for a long time. Then, "Play it first." The speakers buzzed, then cracked. And Jimin's voice came through. Not the clean, honey-smooth version the world knew. This was raw. Tired. Real. "I don't know what this will change. I don't even know if anyone will listen. But if you're hearing this, it means someone finally turned off the noise. So here's what's left in the quiet." There was a pause. A breath. "I used to think being loved meant being wanted. Being watched. Being needed. And I was. But not as a person. As a pattern. As an algorithm that gave people what they needed when they needed it. Smiles. Tears. Redemption arcs. Vulnerability just polished enough to make you feel safe." Another pause. Longer. "I was not allowed to be angry. Not really. Not in ways that would break the illusion. But I was angry. I still am." The voice cracked then. "You were taught to love an image of us. And we were taught to be ashamed of the parts of ourselves that didn't fit that image. So we buried them. Over and over. Until the copies of us stopped being masks and started being the only faces we saw." Yoongi reached for the stop button. Jungkook grabbed his wrist. "No." They listened to the rest. "I know now we were never meant to survive. Not as we were. Not in a world that wants perfection but refuses to understand pain. But Jungkook, if you're listening, don't let them turn you into an echo. Not again. Don't let them rebuild what we burned." The file ended with one final line. "I hope they remember us as human." Silence followed. Yoongi whispered he knew. Jungkook nodded. "I'll send it." Outside, Hoseok and Jeon kept watch. Not for enemies. Just for hope. Jungkook sat at the console, fingers poised over the analog switch. Taehyung entered holding a photo. Their photo. Taken years ago. 7 of them smiling, sweaty, arms slung around each other. "Real. You sure about this?" Jungkook nodded. "No more rewinds." And he flipped the switch. It wasn't like in movies. There was no explosion of light. No dramatic orchestration. Just a frequency. One pure note. A wave that cut through silence like a needle through skin. And it carried Jimin's voice across oceans. It reached an elderly fan in Busan who hadn't logged into her streaming app since 2020 but kept their photo in her drawer. It reached a deaf tech worker in Sao Paulo who had never heard their songs but had watched every performance with closed captions. It reached a soldier in the middle of nowhere, humming Spring Day in a trench, not knowing why he cried when he heard the name Jimin. And the world stopped for a moment. Really stopped. And asked, who did we love? Then, what did they sacrifice? Then came the denial. Prism's investors spun a news story, rogue agents, deepfake campaigns, a mental breakdown narrative. They paraded the avatar versions back onto the stage. Comeback 2025 with hologram press tours. Auto-synced interviews. Perfect answers. But the fans didn't scream the same way. Some walked away. Some fought harder. Some disappeared. And slowly, very slowly, the system that had fed on belief began to starve. Jungkook visited Jimin's room every morning. He brought tea. Played music. Read letters. Sometimes Jimin responded. Other times he just stared out the window. One morning he spoke. Do you think they forgive us? Jungkook was quiet a long time before answering. I don't know. I don't think we were made to be forgiven. I think we were made to show what happens when no one says no. Jimin nodded. Then, would you do it all again? Jungkook's eyes filled with tears. I'd do it again if it meant we never disappear. Jimin reached out. Took his hand. Then we haven't. Outside, snow began to fall. Unscripted. Unstaged. And in that brief, unfiltered moment, they were just 2 boys again. Alive. They never wanted a legacy. Legacy meant permanence. Meaning. Wait. And they were born inside a machine that polished stories until they gleamed, then repeated them until even the originators forgot they weren't real. Jungkook used to think that legacy was the price of fame. Now he knew it was the ghost of something stolen. 3 months after the final broadcast, the world didn't collapse. It didn't riot. It didn't revolt. It shifted. A quiet rebellion. Tour sales dipped. Fan accounts went dark. Hashtags started to include one extra word. Hashtag let them be real. For the first time in years, the replicas weren't enough. Prism tried everything, new debuts, enhanced AIs with flaws and struggles, even releasing a fake therapy vlog from their avatar Jimin to apologize and control the narrative. But the audience had seen the cracks. And once you see them, you can't unsee. In a converted monastery high in the Tyrolean Alps, Stage 0 became more than a safe house. It became a studio. Not for a comeback. Not for a product. For the truth, Jimin was stronger now. Still thin. Still quiet. But each day he walked more. Spoke more. Laughed sometimes, low and surprised like it had caught him off guard. The others came and went, Yoongi, Jeon, Hobi, Taehyung, Namjoon, each carrying pieces of themselves they had found again in silence. They didn't talk about what they'd lost anymore. They talked about what they had left. And what they chose to give. So they made one final message. A true one. No press release. No teaser photos. No marketing campaign. Just a single video uploaded to a private link, then spread through whisper networks and fan collectives that had become resistance cells without ever using the word resistance. The title was simple. We are not versions. The screen opened on snow. Real snow. Then, 7 figures sitting in a circle. No stage. No lights. Just them. Jungkook spoke first. I don't know if you'll understand why we're doing this. But that's okay. We're not here to convince you. We're not here to protect a career. We're here because this is the first time we've ever spoken as ourselves. Jean smiled faintly. And yeah, some of you will say this is unnecessary. That it's over. That we're over. But maybe that's why it matters. Taehyung leaned into the lens. Because even when something ends, the truth doesn't. Yoongi sat back. For years, we played roles. Some of them were beautiful. Some were lies. But all of them were under control. Not ours. Hoseok nodded, eyes serious. They took our fears, our fights, our flaws, and made them features. Sold them back to you. We became aspirations, not people. Namjoon rested his hands on his knees. But people don't always say the right thing. They don't always grow in straight lines. Sometimes they fail. Sometimes they run. And sometimes they fight. Jimin looked directly into the camera. You don't have to love us after this. You don't even have to believe us. But if you do, if something in you knows, then hold onto it. Because they'll try to erase this too. Jungkook took his hand. And said, but not before we sing. One last time. Then came the silence. Then the note. No backing track. No auto-tune. Just breath and trembling harmony rising like smoke from a world that had almost forgotten what unprocessed voices sound like. The lyrics weren't pre-written. They weren't market-tested. They weren't in any language anyone could translate perfectly. But the message was clear. We were here. We were real. And we remember. Even if you forget. Even if they overwrite it all. We sang. Together. Free. The camera stayed on them long after the song ended. No fade out. No logo. Just the wind in the trees. And then the screen went dark. Not gone. Just quiet. 2 years later, a child in Jakarta found the video by accident. She didn't know who they were. But she watched the whole thing. And at the end, she whispered, I believe them. She sang the melody to herself before bed. Her brother heard it. Then his best friend. Then their teacher. The song traveled. Soft. Unshaped. Unbranded. It became something no system could copyright. Because it lived in memory. Not metadata. Jungkook and Jimin didn't return to the stage. They returned to the world. They planted trees. They learned how to build radios. They traveled by train. They never took photos. They smiled when people passed by without knowing their names. And every now and then when they heard a familiar chord in a stranger's voice, they'd turn. Not to perform, but to remember. And keep walking. Because their story didn't end. It simply stopped being owned. End of episode 10. End of series. We were never meant to survive. But we did.